This episode of This Is BS is brought to you by Brawl Bespoke, a brand new suit and tailoring business founded by the McCann brothers, Alex and Mitch. Yes, the coronavirus is currently at full swing and a lot of us are stuck at home, but soon we'll be going back to work and having our nights out, and you want to look your best when you do. So if you want to take a look at this brand new suit and tailoring business, who are by all means some of the most well-dressed people I've ever met, take a look in the description below. You can go through to their website and check out all the options that they've got going at this time.
Welcome to the first ISO edition of This Is BS. I have a fantastic guest today. This guest riles me up all the time about rugby, and it's probably one of my favourite moments at work is getting an email from her about some abuse about the weekend about my team losing. But it's fantastic to have someone on the call today who has been going through all the fun stuff we've all seen so far, and I've got the one and only Rebecca Powell on the line. Rebecca, how are you doing today?
Hey Ben, I am good, thank you. And first of all, can I just compliment you on your lovely top? Melbourne Rugby. Wow, what can I say about Melbourne Uni Rugby? They just set the bar really high.
Leave us alone. We haven't won a championship since 1967, but we'll get there eventually, which is fine. So, yes, this video today will be very rugby themed, considering we're both diehard rugby tragics. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun old time. So, for those of you who remember what we used to do with This Is BS, we used to start off asking some questions. But I want to get straight into Becky yourself. So, why don't you give everyone a bit of an understanding of kind of what you've been doing, what you previously and what you're doing now during these crazy times.
Yep, cool. All right. Well, for those who don't know me, I am Irish and been living in Australia for 11 years now, and became a citizen just before everything shut down. Yay me! Proud moment. So I've been working in recruitment or talent acquisition for 13 years, lucky for some, and moved from agency in Ireland. I worked for a couple of agencies over here when I first came over, and then moved in-house with SportsBet, doing talent acquisition, then moving into internal comms and engagement. And then most recently, I was the TA manager for BetEasy. So doing the end-to-end talent acquisition, doing all the employer branding stuff. So working with you, Ben, on producing some content for BetEasy. And yeah, now I unfortunately find myself in the situation, like quite a few others, of being redundant at a time when, life can be a bit challenging for a lot of people. But to be honest, I've decided not to dwell on that. I've decided to look forward. I've been very fortunate throughout my career to have a lot of support from great managers and mentors. So rather than rushing back into the job market myself, I thought I'd take the foot off the gas and get involved with Jobs4Australia, which is a not-for-profit organization comprising people like myself, so TA managers or leaders and HR leaders as well. And what we're doing is we're helping to empower job seekers to get the tools and resources they need to help them with their job search. So people from all over Australia, all walks of life, all job types, who've been made redundant or let go, or simply can't get someone to look at their application, because it's pretty challenging times for a lot of people. So Jobs4Australia is something that's been keeping me really very busy over the last few weeks, and it's been great. And yeah, that's where I'm at the moment, and that's what's got me here today.
Awesome. Well, look, something I should really let everyone know is Rebecca and I did some work together whilst me being at my job and Bex being at BetEasy. But what I really find incredibly fascinating about your journey and the stuff that you've done as well is it's sort of bringing the element of talent acquisition to the more digital space and being kind of the face of a lot of these businesses, which is, I think, a very fascinating part for a lot of people. For those who've seen This Is BS before, we've had people such as Keela Savelli on, who's kind of in the same boat. But what I think is fascinating about your one with the Jobs4Australia stuff now is the element of helping those who need the help at this point in time. So if you don't mind me asking, so what's the most interesting part of working for J4A at the moment? What's the best part for you?
Well, the thing is, J4A, like I said, it's comprising a lot of quite senior leaders across Australia. So directors and managers of talent acquisition or HR professionals. So we're dealing with a lot of really experienced and accomplished people, but we've all come together in such a spirit of unity. Very, very few egos involved as well. So when you're dealing with so many people who have so much knowledge and experience, you might think that nothing would ever get done, but actually we've got up and running incredibly quickly. We have about 200 people at the moment who are getting coaching or support from the volunteers, and the turnaround from we're 0 to 100 in a matter of days. It's been amazing in terms of the response. So that's been the first thing, really, is just how well as a community we've come together and been working together. It's very open, collaborative engagement, and the amount of people putting their hand up and asking if they can get involved and help out. Vendors and suppliers video my job. I do want to call out the support that you guys have given us, because it's been phenomenal. We've been making great use of the platform with our tips videos, but it's just great how a community can come together. A lot of people, I think talent acquisition in particular can get a bit of a bad rap because people think of it as just recruitment, and with all due respect to the recruitment industry, there are definitely people who give it a bad name. And so people question, why are these recruiters all coming together to do something that's not for them? And that, getting over that hurdle and going, actually, we've all got skills that we think others can use. Some people are still working and still coaching. And it's just, it's nice to be able to silence some of the critics as well, who think that recruitment is a very selfish enterprise. It's only about the commission or whatever. It's not the case at all, especially with talent acquisition. So that's been the great result of what we're doing. And then just starting to get some feedback from the candidates themselves. I had a guy who has never had a recruiter or a company call him back when he submitted an application. Just wouldn't get any response at all. So we worked on I did some coaching with him on his CV, did some coaching with him on his LinkedIn profile. Guess what? Starting to get calls. So I feel like I know what I'm talking about now. It's great to get that confirmation. But for other coaches as well, one guy's never been able to get beyond the first interview. Now he's getting second and third interviews. So we're starting to hear all of these good news stories filtering through. And I guess at the end of the day, it's quite humbling because we are dealing with real people with real problems, real challenges. And so what we say and do has a considerable impact on them. So that's been quite special as well.
Awesome. I think that's for me is the big part about J4 that I really appreciate, having spoken to yourself and Andrew Kirby and a few others that are really involved in it, is that it's all candidate centric. It's all about helping those who have been affected by this current situation the most. And I think, to me, for someone like me who's been working the whole way through and lucky enough to work for a company that allows me to work the whole way through, having seen friends, family, other people that have seen this, downturn, it can be incredibly difficult for someone just to say, I can just get back out there, or there'll be something there. And I can attest to this because I've got friends who are applying for roles where usually there was maybe 50 people applying for them. Now there's thousands. Yeah. So this incredibly, backwards world that we're in right now, it's an interesting time to see the real people come out. I'll talk about that a little later on in some of the BS points, but seeing the real people in this situation, who's willing to help, who's willing to put themselves out there and try it, rather than perhaps taking more than accepting, sort of thing, or taking going. So I find that really endearing about the whole project. I find it so fascinating that as many people as they've got behind it, because in a world that is given such malice, like say recruitment, it's fascinating to see that now that all these people are really chiming in and helping out. Now it's all good. Now it's happening. Now it's got a positive spin from potential media outlets and stuff like that. Whereas before it was like, recruiters just throw shit against the wall and see what sticks. It's one of those horrible things that you see, and the best thing we can do is just keep the positivity going and keep helping people. So, what can you do?
Yep.
So, totally get that. So let's move on to the next point. Now, we've kind of covered the what you've done and stuff like that. And now we're going to move into the actual BSs. And I think those of you who haven't seen this before, Rebecca's going to give a couple of points, and by the end of it, we're going to give some suggestions on how we can go about improving it. It's not about just sitting here and ranting about what's bad. It's about adding some value, seeing what we can do to help ourselves, whether it be as one person or an entire business. So without further ado, Bex, why don't you start off with what your first BS is?
Right, my first BS, and I don't want to harp on about COVID or anything like that, but one of the things I've noticed as a job seeker myself is I'm finding that a lot of companies are using COVID as an excuse for bad behavior, and that is not okay. And so what kind of bad behavior? All right, so for example, not responding and getting back to people when they've applied. I've interviewed for a few jobs and I've been waiting weeks for feedback. Not cool. That's bullshit. Are we allowed to say bullshit, or can I say bollocks?
Of course we can. We can say whatever we like.
Excellent. Now is actually the time for companies to be looking at ways to improve their candidate experience. You've got time on your hands. This is a no-brainer. Other examples of the bad behavior, we've moved from being in a candidate-driven market where, as you said, Ben, you'd have maybe 20, 30 people applying for a job. Now you've got 60, 100, crazy numbers applying for one position. And one of the things I've noticed is that companies, first of all, are starting to drop salaries. And secondly, they're increasing the level of expectation in that role, yet dropping, not including a salary that actually meets that standard. Right. So for example, I recently applied for a talent acquisition manager role for a company that will remain nameless, but suddenly they've changed the job to be a specialist role. So all the accountabilities and responsibilities remain the same. They want someone to do a managerial level position, but they're not actually going to pay for it. Bollocks.
Okay. No, I am totally in the same boat as you here. So I've got a few questions I kind of want to run by you on this sense. So you mentioned that the first part we're going to talk about is the bad behavior. So what I think is that there's a divergence here of companies and the nature of how it's going. Everyone's on the PR, warpath right now to show that they are caring during this pandemic. I've seen it on every TV ad from, here to Kingdom Come about how they care about their customers or they care about the people they're working with. Every superannuation scheme is the one that will help you get through this process, whatever it may be. But what I want to kind of hone in on that particular point is actually something which I find fascinating about the nature of the not getting back to you or the stuff like that. Do you think that perhaps people are utilizing the COVID sort of thing as an excuse to kind of lax off on their current role and kind of blame the nature of what we're going through right now? Or is it the case of just simply being, just saying, I don't have the time or I'm too busy? Do you think it's one of those two schools of thought?
Look, I think yes is the short answer. I do think a lot of people are using it as an excuse. Now, at the same time, when I gave the example of suddenly the volume of applications for one job skyrocketing, it can be tough for people just to deal with the volume coming through. But again, frankly, it's a bit of a bad excuse because there's so much technology available within the talent acquisition community that can allow you to process and get through these volumes fairly quickly.
Okay, so just as a point there, so you talk about the technology that comes into it. Is there potentially a situation where people are not essentially utilizing technology in a certain way to kind of actually combat this because they're so used to the old school way of like CV comes in, yes or no, tick box, on your way, first interview. Now they have to change up their style of doing things like this a lot of the time. Do you think that's also a contributing factor to that?
Yeah, I think people are I think there's a concern that people need to look busy. And the trouble is when you're looking busy, you're working harder, not smarter. And I think the challenge is that they're afraid of change in a time that is just riddled with change. And I think if I do change one more thing, I might lose my mind. And I think there is an element of that. For people who, like in my last role, I was a standalone TA person, so I didn't have that much tech available to me. So I get that there are smaller companies who legitimately can't afford to use the tech or invest in tech, and who literally are overwhelmed simply by volume. So absolutely, I don't want to imply that I'm just sort of whitewashing the whole thing. It's not a blank canvas of blame. But there are plenty of larger organizations, and it's the larger ones that I've noticed in particular have been dropping the ball, where some simple coaching and training, because I know they have the resources, just looking at how to use their tech a little bit more smartly. Things like bulk communications, even if you have to forego the personal touch, the way you might have embraced pre-COVID. Fact is, some sort of communication to your candidates, even if it's just as a, sorry, we're keeping you in limbo, but this is what we're dealing with. There's so many simple little tweaks and hacks that they could utilize to make a more engaging experience, even calling it out and sending a comms going, this is the volume, this is the time frame, simple things like that.
Okay, so I'll ask the question there, because this is another point that I thought was quite interesting, was the element of transparency in this day and age with everything that's going on can be a bit of a double-edged sword in terms of, say, for example, talking about, hey, we've got so many people coming through, we're sorry for delaying everything, but we'll come back to you at some point, and it takes 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever the number is. I understand that part, but the other part that comes back with that transparency is being to a point where, say, you talk about the bad behavior, that's where the transparency should come in. And I think that's a big part that I'm finding frustrating, and looking at the market at the moment going, there are so many companies that could be far more transparent with what's happening, but unfortunately, because they don't want to be seen as weak or falling off the cliff or whatever it may be, that they're kind of hiding the element, like saying, hey, we're still going okay, we're still doing fine. I think that's a part. So my question out of all that is, the bigger companies that have that TA acquisition team, that have the big group, or even just the management above that handling it, do you think that it's basically down to a cost-cutting measure, or do you think it's down to a PR measure that a lot of this stuff is happening? That particular some companies in particular are doing this practice of trying to undercut more senior people at this particular time. Do you think this comes back to the same thing, cost-cutting, PR, stuff like that? What do you think the mindset behind it is?
I think they're doing it because they reckon they can do it. They look at certain sectors where we're seeing more and more and more people entering the job market, and they go, well, I might as well give it a go. You know, if I can pay for a manager, but at a specialist rate, why wouldn't I do that? So I understand the logic behind it. It doesn't make it right at all, but they're thinking, well, there's going to be heaps of people in the market. They're going to be desperate for work. So they'll be prepared to do anything and accept anything to get a job. And you see this behavior as well, particularly for women returning to work after maybe taking time out to look after their kids. And there's such a level of bias shown towards women in particular, or parents or primary carers returning to work, where companies go, well, look, you've been out of the loop for a while. You want to get back to work. I'll give you this. You know, so and suddenly you're accepting a job for 20 to 30% below what you had been earning, or what someone else who didn't have that time out would be earning, because you're desperate to get back into the market. So I think there's absolutely quite a Machiavellian approach to all of this by the companies. And I've seen some highly, highly accomplished people taking giant pay cuts because they have mortgages, they've got families, and they simply can't afford to be out of work. And
so that then begs the question of going, okay, so if they're taking these roles now, I imagine there's a lot of people that are potentially taking on maybe contract roles rather than full-term roles based on the market and stuff like that. So what do you think at this point in time? I know there's lots of people that kind of have to take that particular, stance as well. Do you think I think from my end, I think it's incredibly morally ambiguous to be focusing on, okay, what can we get at the lowest price? It's just it's the same thing where it's like, you buy the cheapest part, it's not going to run very long. It's the same sort of concept. But you're getting a very, very good part for very cheap. The capitalist in you says, okay, well, that's actually going to be a very beneficial thing for the business for that long time. So then that brings down to the next part, which is I totally agree with you in the sense of going, those, the parents who come back from work, whether it be paternal, maternal leave, stuff like that. I find it incredibly fascinating that that is still a problem in 2020 or 2019, back when we were starting this whole thing off, was that we have a situation where we have a more balanced workforce now than ever in terms of the quality in terms of that, except for apparently CEOs in Australia. If you're called John, you're more likely to be CEO than if you're a woman, for example, which is still absolutely stupid. I think it's John. Old white guys works well. But so for me, one of the last question I kind of want to pose on this one is that if I'm someone who takes a smaller salary, I need to pay the bills, I need to get the stuff done, for example, here. How do I go about how do I go about making sure that my position isn't in jeopardy in a long-term thing of still being underpaid, even past, say, when this pandemic kind of toils down and everything like that? How do I go about getting back to my usual value in that sense?
Look, I think it's worth, perhaps, if you're negotiating at the start with an employer, going, look, this is what I'm actually worth. I'm conscious of, revenues down during the pandemic. You could perhaps negotiate a pay rise once business picks up, if it's a job in an organization that you're particularly interested in and keen to be a part of. There could be some sort of negotiation there. I mean, the other thing is, once we get over this hurdle and companies are opening their doors again and businesses ramping back up, recruitment is going to go up again. Companies are going to need experienced talent acquisition specialists and managers. And so you could always go, well, do you know what? You guys weren't prepared to stump up and pay what I'm worth and what the market values me at. So I'm going to go elsewhere. And so companies risk that attrition if they're not prepared to really value the candidates.
Well, I think that's another part to it, is the value, the short-term, the long-term value of bringing someone on at this point in time. And you could bring on someone who's been at management level for X amount of time, and you bring them on a specialist role for a short period of time. And I can see the business sense in doing something like that. Yep. But the one thing I think that we will see when it comes out of this, and having looked at studied recruitment trends for God knows how long and gone through all this stuff and seen the value of this sort of thing, one thing I've noticed with the nature of the downturn and how we're moving is that we're going to see a lot of people take potentially short-term options, and then they'll look to convert them into long-term stays with their particular company. But what will happen, we'll start to see, is that people will get to that conversion rate, but everyone will be getting there at the same time. So everyone will say, we'll have a end of 2020 contract, whatever it may be. By the start of 2021, we may be out of this, but then you'll start to see an influx of people with a value that is up here. The company was only paying them here. So we're going to see a lot of people come back into the workforce potentially at being paid at a lower rate, but having that value. So businesses should be very, very aware of this, because if you are going to be A, not looking at the long-term value, B, trying to squeeze the most out of the sponge whilst it's there, your PR is also going to come back to this. So that people understand that you're a business that goes about trying to recruit in a particular manner of, we'll get everything we can out of you. Once you're done, we can get someone else to come in and take that 6-month contract or that top because we are such and such. So I think that to me is going to be the trend that's going to happen if we see a lot of these short-term contracts that go to end of 2020, 2021 starts. We'll see a lot of businesses that will have either a high attrition rate in talent acquisition, not just talent acquisition, but lots of different places.
Across the board,
Across the board. But what I think will be the last part to it will be that we will see the true value of these, the market value of these guys actually go up dramatically, because when people actually have that influx of value from new customers and people coming in. Are we going to pay a 100K worth person back to 80K just during this time? If we offer them 80K again, but some other business goes, well, we're offering all our TAs 100K, whatever it may be. Well, why would I sit at this business for 20K less? Yes, I had a good time and helped me through it. But a business might then go, well, we helped you out during this time. We gave you the opportunity to feed your family and stuff like that. And that's the other double-edged sword of this part is companies going, well, we helped you out. We helped you out. I think it's an interesting, it's a dichotomy that's going to be a very interesting tidbit at the end. And I think you'll find a lot of people will be incredibly selfless during this time. When we get back to normal, you may see a bit more selfishness in terms of like my value.
Oh yeah, look, I totally agree, and it's interesting because I've been stuck in the mindset. I guess my career has always been permanent roles as well, and you bring up a good point. I've not entertained the thought at this stage of taking contract roles. I'm someone who, even though I've worked in the gambling industry for 6-7 years, I crave security. I'm risk averse. So that's the thing. There's going to have to be a massive mindset shift by candidates as well as the employers as well to get comfortable with that gig economy. And the other thing I'd add to it is companies are going to have to stop, I guess within the TA space or the recruitment space or HR space, we're going to have to shift away from those longer term, sexier projects and move to a much more operational mindset. And just focus on what's in front of us and getting that done right, rather than planning for all these big events in the future, because things are changing so much that, do you really invest all that time and effort in something that might not come through? Whereas
might come for a while, yeah.
Yeah, so. But if you can get the operational stuff right, and it goes back to that immediate candidate engagement and candidate experience, if you can start to get those smaller details right, then down the track, once things settle, we move forward, then maybe you can start to invest in the sexy stuff again. But yeah, I think you're right. It's that gig economy moving forward, those shorter term roles, but how do the candidates and also the companies manage that? And then, what do you actually focus on in that time as well?
Well, I think that's another part. Well, I mean, I'm the same as you. I've always had, salaried long-term employees, stuff like that, as an element for me. What I think, I'm usually on these parts, I'll touch on what kind of suggestions you'd make to improve it. But you kind of already touched on a few of those in terms of saying things like transparency, being able to, offer more candidate-centric experiences. If you were to say, let's take an example there. If you were to give one suggestion to these big businesses that are essentially playing the game in the shadows or whatever it may be, what would be a suggestion you might make? And the first thing you might do if you walked in the door and got to sit down with them, what would be the thing that you would suggest to make their experience more candidate-centric?
I'd get them to all apply for a job in that company and actually replicate the candidate journey for themselves, because I can almost guarantee you none of them have done it. And actually go through every step that a candidate goes through, all of those touch points, and look at how each touch point makes them feel and what was the response that they were expecting. I did it myself at Bed Easy. I hadn't done it in ages, and I actually did it about 18 months into my role. Changed all of my communications to candidates as a result. Okay,
cool. So I like that. I think that's a really good way of making it more, because I think the shoe fits best the person walking the road is the analogy I use, which is basically like, we have a focus at Video My Job of going, we want to be customer centric. We want people to understand that the value of a product isn't for us to tell you how to do things, it's how you value it. So I find that part fascinating. I think any company that's currently recruiting at this point in time, and there are plenty of companies recruiting, trust me, I've seen lots of people posting on things like that, which is great. But what I think will come of this is a really good positive, which I think comes from your one. It's like companies may actually review their candidate experience item now and go, since we aren't recruiting high numbers, how can we make it more interesting and more valuable? There's a small plug to VMJ. We kind of talk about putting videos at each stage of the recruitment workflow and say, look, if you get a video back saying thanks for applying, it's much better than just getting a standard email. But to your point in terms of making sure that people understand that there are people waiting or steps like that, wearing the shoe is the most important part. And as much as I would like to say that companies will be doing this, I still think that we still have a lot of businesses at the moment that are still so focused on damage control and operational, maneuvering and stuff to make sure their business stays afloat, that perhaps the candidate experience isn't getting the value that it should be getting right now. The ones that are doing it are going to be better in the long-term future.
Yeah.
So look, I totally agree with everything you're saying. So that's, I'm not sure if you've actually, well, one other thing that people should all know, I say yes to everything that people come on the show because I want to keep friends with people. So that's kind of how it works. So yes, I totally agree. And we're going to now move on to part 2. All right, so question 1 is done and dusted, and you may have noticed a bit of a costume change from us. We are going to be trying to wear as many cool things as possible. I'm once again wearing the Melbourne Uni because my New Zealand shirts are in a country I'm not in, which is New Zealand, which is fine. So I've got all my Australian-based ones, but don't worry, there'll be a secret one at the end for my family at least. So now we're not on this call on these. This is BS. We like to focus on the recruitment world, but we also like to focus on work world, but also personal lives of our friends and family. So Bex, why don't you tell me about what your number 2 is? Because I am very excited to talk about this one.
My number 2 peeve at the moment, or BS, is the sourdough diet. I am a victim of the sourdough diet. It is amazing and awful in equal measures. I now am basically I think my body mass is about 50% flour to water. And yes, I jumped on the sourdough bandwagon. It's a delicious, delicious bandwagon, but the weigh scales are not my friends right now.
I've never, ever, ever heard of a diet starting with anything that starts with carbs. Well, one that works at least in my eyes. I mean, like, hey, eat all these carbs and you'll be sweet. Well, good. Like, hey, in a pandemic when you can't go to the gym or do a lot of stuff, eat a lot of bread.
Yeah,
No?
look,
No?
a diet doesn't have to, the word diet doesn't necessarily have to mean weight loss. It's just a food diet. And I have, yes, thrown myself wholeheartedly into the sourdough diet, and I am full of regret, but I literally baked another loaf this morning.
Okay, so the question I have to ask then is, what prompted you to jump onto this diet?
I love bread. I really do.
That's all I need to know.
Bread and butter. It's a favorite. Like my husband and I would buy a loaf of sourdough every weekend, and I like getting the crusty bits, slathering it with butter. It's so good. And I'm like, why spend $6-7 on a loaf when I could just try and make my own? I am now an unemployed bum. I've got time on my hands, and a friend of mine saved me a bit of time, gave me a sourdough starter that he already had. So all I had to do was feed it, mix it up with a lot of flour.
Okay, quick question here I have. So I understand why you like bread, and that's all fun and games and that stuff as well.
Mainly for the butter, actually. Mainly for the butter.
Okay, so it's butter then rather than the bread. I get that.
Yeah.
So so in lockdown, these are the things that everyone has their own little things that they're getting into. Like I'm playing more music and doing sorts of stuff, and sourdough diet sounds like your thing. What do you think that if you were in a normal world, you would have jumped onto this particular diet, or is it just because, hey, I'm sitting at home, I want to make some bread, or I've got nothing else to do, or do you think?
To be honest, there's a good chance I probably would have done it eventually anyway. I don't mind baking the odd time. I've got blueberry and banana muffins over there. So yeah, there's a good chance I probably would have. We make our own pasta here. I do
like your own pasta.
And that's pre-COVID. I make my own pasta. It's a pre-COVID.
I'm such a millennial. I refuse to make anything from scratch if I can get it in a packet. I am just like, I'm sitting here going, I have got. I could be the kind of person that tells you I am busy, but I'm sitting in my underwear playing PlayStation, eating Pringles for 4 hours, and I still refuse to make my own pasta. It's part of the deal of being someone who lives by themselves in their own apartment and does video for a living. We've done stuff like that. It's great. But what I would be so in this the sourdough diet. Run me through what a daily sourdough diet looks like. What does it look like for you?
For me, it's fresh, getting up at 7 a.m. to knead my dough, get it in the oven, and then by 9:30, 10 o'clock, I've got a loaf that I can cut into. So I have a couple of slices, still a bit warm, covered in butter. Then a few hours later, I might put some avo or smoked salmon or cheese on top, and that's my lunch. And then if I'm doing like a bolognese or a soup for dinner, then I'm dipping the bread into my soup or my stew or whatever. Now,
this is a first. This is a first on ThisIsBS. I've never had a guest salivate on camera. I've not had that before. So this is a first. So you've got all this food, which is fantastic. You're currently making all this different stuff, and it's basically like Pavlov's dog. Every morning you wake up, there's a bell. It's just the sound of the sourdough going off. What I would be curious of is, have you tried any other diets that you really enjoyed, or anything else that popped into your mind before the sourdough diet?
Well, but before I talk about other food, I do also now make sourdough pancakes with my sourdough discard. So if I'm not having bread, I'm having pancakes made with the sourdough starter. And for dinner the other night, I made a sourdough pizza base, because I also make pizza bases from scratch. I can't, if I'm not getting a takeaway pizza, I'm making it myself. Other diets, well, my father always had the seafood diet. You seafood, you eat it. Had to get a dad joke in there somehow.
No, I mean, usually it's my boss Bowden doing it, so now it's your turn. So this Zoom call, I needed at least one per bit call, which is great. So.
I actually, honestly, have never been on a diet in my life. If we look at diets and the reasons why people go on them, they're bullshit. Diets are actual bullshit. It's just about having a good balanced lifestyle.
No, you're talking to someone who used to have to do it for like sport and stuff like that. So I understand having done, counting macros and, fasting and all that sort of crap.
I've never counted a calorie in my life.
Like I can tell you what, there's a lot of them. So there's no point, because there's a lot of them. And you exercise and they don't go away very quickly. You can do, what is it, like 2 minutes worth of jump rope, and you burn something like 12 calories based out of that, and you go, oh, that's just a burger. I was like, I believe in 100 calories. So it's like, you need that. You're like, oh, it's burning off. So I totally get that, because for me, I'm the same boat. Like I'm a skinny white dude. I don't need to diet. I'm fine. So
I'm a woman in my 40s now, Ben. The more carbs I eat, the more work I have to do to get rid of them. So
one day I will also be a woman in my 40s. It's fine. One day I will be a woman in my 40s, and I will understand that. Basically, I'm getting the Karen haircut going already, which is fine. I'm trying to do the whole, speak to the manager thing going already. So
what does that say about my hair?
Because the difference is that you can pull off a Jack Goodhue mullet. I can't do that. Yeah, exactly. You can pull it off. The only thing I can really do, my haircuts can be basically the trendy little side cut or the Justin Bieber bowl cut. I've got no in between. I'm a middle class white guy. Those are the only options I've got. I go mullet, I go bogan. I go short, I go skinhead. I've got no options. So, and I try to hark back to my very, very thin Māori roots, very little amount of Māori in me, and go, can I get a shave my head and look tough? But no, I can't. I look like, have you ever seen one of those dolls in a secondhand Saver store, but it's clearly the person's played with it too much and it's melted a little bit? That's what I look like when I'm bald, because I've got a big massive back on the head here. So trust me, as much as I like to try that, I'm fine. But to go back to this diet sort of thing, so for someone who is considering being on the sourdough diet, someone who is thinking, this is the diet for me, diet being the parentheses terms, what can you tell them to stay away from said diet? Because we're here to fix things. What can you tell them?
So to stay away from the sourdough diet, what do they?
Well, with ThisIsBS, you say BS being you're now addicted to the sourdough. It sounds like portion control would be a good way to start. But let's continue.
Okay, yeah. All right. So I think first of all, don't buy any more flour. That's an easy way to avoid feeding the beast. And even though it's winter time and soups, or it's autumn and we're moving into winter, it's cold in Melbourne, soups are great, but you know what? You don't need bread with every soup. Maybe stop the soups, and that way you can stop the sourdough diet. Or
what about gluten-free bread? Would that be
wouldn't
okay?
work. No. What's the point?
Some of us who couldn't eat gluten-free, this guy. So
Oh no.
it was
I'm
like
not
getting
so-
cardboard, but like a really well seasoned cardboard. It was like that. It was really good.
Yeah, no. I mean, sorry to the celiacs out there, but gluten-free sourdough I don't think would work.
Is there
at
such
all.
a thing?
I don't think so, but you never know. Someone might
Okay.
invent it. But yeah, sourdough diet is delicious, but in very, very small doses. Maybe on Saturday, Sunday, but try and avoid it Monday to Friday. Otherwise,
Okay.
you'll end up looking like the Michelin Man.
That is something I never thought I would hear say on this show. Is that if you keep eating, you're like the Michelin Man. I thought this would be all about fun things like recruitment.
I'm here
workforce.
for a whole pile of firsts, man. I'm
the
taking
celebration
this
in the Michelin
BS in a whole new direction.
Hey, well, look, it's a whole new series because I can't be in front of the person and have them be disgusted by the sight of my Michelin style body anyway, so that's fine. So look, totally agree. Diet's a BS in my opinion. To start off with number 2,
Yes.
eat in control. I'm one of the people at the moment who is living next to this guy here, and he's my best friend at the moment because I live alone. This is my
Is
friend.
that your fridge?
His name is Tony. He's great. He's right next to a poster. He's right next to a poster of Amy Winehouse over there.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah.
So
See it
I
now.
said to myself, she lives to 27. I'm past that now. I want to make sure I live my life to the fullest by not eating everything in Tony. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how it works.
No.
So,
It's absolutely bang on. Diets are bullshit. The sourdough diet is a delicious piece of bullshit, but in moderation. And we can still exercise, folks. So just get out there.
I keep telling people that. I've got people upstairs who, for some reason, like to exercise on the dot at 6 every morning and every night, and it makes it sound like, you know, the rumbling when Jurassic Park happened and you can see the water
Oh,
shake.
yeah.
And I'm like, either I've got people above me who are like 300 pounds, or they're just really good at jumping really hard. Oh my God. So yes, you can still diet. Yes, you can run around, but yes, I totally agree with the second yes. And we're now going to move on to something a bit more work related, I suppose, which would be good. So we'll just we'll move on to number 3. All right, so before we get on to number 3, we've both changed shirts once again. Bex has on the fantastic Munster shirt, as worn by some greats such as Christian Keller. We have talked about this before. But mine is a little bit more obscure. I'm actually wearing one from my first job I had in the UK at Michael Page. We played a little game between the UK and the world, and I've still got my number 9 jersey on here. So, long time ago, but if you're trying to figure out where the hell this team is from, it's a recruitment company, so which is always good for our next third point. Not really a rugby shirt, but hey, it works. So we've talked about sourdough, we've talked about recruitment, we've talked about all kinds of stuff, but this one's getting back to more of a current lifestyle situation that we're in and the nature of moving forward. So why don't you run me through what your BS number 3 is today?
I think it's BS when people talk about going back to work. I don't know what you guys have been doing for the last 6 to 8 weeks. I'm pretty sure the whole working from home was actually working. So the whole notion of going back to work is incredibly disrespectful to the people who've been putting in probably more hours at home than they had been in the office. I know my husband is now doing meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning as opposed to his first meeting, which was always at 9:30. So suddenly there's an extra hour that he's doing in the mornings. People working through lunches. People don't have to commute coming home, so there's an extra hour in the evenings. So let's stop with the bullshit of talking about going back to work.
Okay, so I want to touch on the first point there, which I think is very important. I know the and's coming next, but I want to quickly touch on this point. People who say going back to normal, deem that being back to normal is in an office, the 9 to 5, the old school style. And this is something I had a really good conversation with Cameron Norton about, who formerly of Davidson, now Expert 360. He talked about how the 9 to 5 is such an old school ideal, but somehow people want to go back to it because it's a way to monitor work and stuff. So what do you think has been driving this narrative of back to work? Do you think it's just because of the nature of the pandemic that we're in, or do you think it's more a case of people harping back to going, okay, if you're working from home now, it's way too different. We need everyone back in the same room.
Look, I'll be honest. I think it's just bad language insofar as they do mean back to the office for a start. So the whole back to work, it's a bit like when you say I'm going home and you're referring to the hotel that you're staying in because you're on holidays. People just say that the office is work, and that's how, there is an element of that. But in terms of back to normal, I think, lads, that notion is dead in the water. You cannot go back to the way things were. It is utterly impossible to go backwards like that. The simple fact is that life, as we know it, is changing, has to change, and will continue to change. But yeah, I think for the most part, to be honest, it is just a poor choice of words. And I'd like to think that because so many preconceived ideas about what remote working was have now been blown out of the water, I would like to think that companies are going to open themselves up to embracing these new ways of working, to be a little bit more open. But yeah.
Okay, so I think another part to this is the element of being open, or it's more a case of like talking about people being back to normal. The language thing, to me, isn't as big a problem as it is the idea that we're going to go back to this ideal society of people, clocking in, clocking out, stuff like that. And I think someone like myself, so for those who know me, they know I work 1 to 2 days from home most of the time anyway. I live pretty much in the city. I'm currently looking at the city skyline in front of me. I'm right near work, so it's fine. But I think that the people who are using the ideal of going, oh, let's get back to normal, or when we get back to work, and it's like, for someone like me who has meetings at anywhere from 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night, not the new normal, as people like to even use that word, which is fun. It's like, we have a situation where we're now combining two main parts of our lives, our home life and our work life, which you basically take up essentially 80 to 85% of our time if you're past the age of 25, which a lot of people are. What I would be curious to know from your perspective in terms of this is like saying, do we think that the people that are pushing this back to work and stuff like that are people who are in positions of power to try and force it quicker back to its normal, or do you think it's just people who are out of work or people who aren't back in where they were before the current pandemic?
Yeah, it's probably both. I would imagine that, a lot of managers and leaders are freaking out that they're not making money. They're losing money hand over fist. Hopefully, many of them are paying to keep their workers employed, even with massive downturns. So for them, they need to get back into a state where they are earning. And so they're pushing that narrative. And perhaps if they stop and think, and it goes back to the empathy we spoke about in an earlier point about that candidate empathy and putting themselves in their shoes, simple rephrasing can carry a lot of weight and a lot of impact. So yes, you want to get back to earning money, but you can't go back to normal. So they just need to tailor the language a little bit. And then for those of us who aren't working, back to normal could be getting back into a job, getting back into a routine. But the 9 to 5 definitely can't happen. If you think about the fact that if we have to maintain the social distancing, how do you get to work on public transport?
It's the same concept as like we work in a share space. So we have an office in a share space. So how are we supposed to work next door to each other in the same spot? Like, it's going to be a case where you'll see, I've got friends, for example, I've got a very good friend of mine who is a paralegal at a law firm, and they are all still at the office. Yeah. So they're all spread out and stuff like that because they're like, well, this is the best way that we function as a business. And I can understand that from that perspective. But I think this one, I want to kind of harp back a little bit to your first BS, mixing in with this, is going, the idea that the new normal was a positive environment for a lot of people was actually a bit of a lie in that sense. It's like going, okay, some people were working themselves to the bone, some people were constantly doing this, and now have the free time to understand what they want to do. A very good friend of mine, has been stood down from her job working at the Marvel Stadium, and she basically is saying that, she's now taking the time to realize that maybe that's not what she's potentially wanting to do moving forward, which is understandable. But I think that then comes down to the next part I want to discuss, which is talking about the language and the way people are talking about it like it's going to be some real positive to come back from it. Do you see anything in this sort of current time, next few months that we see, where people will deem ourselves being back to normal? Is it the pubs being reopened? Is it being able to go to work? Is it is it being able to go to a restaurant and not wearing face masks? Is there anything that stands out to you?
I don't think we're going to get to. I think we're moving in the right direction, that we're going to see an easing of restriction, but I don't think we will ever get back to that complete sort of free state that we had pre-COVID. Simply because, especially going through winter time and flu season, we can't risk a second wave. So and you make a very good point that for people who are out of work, is normal for them just having a job and going back to it, or is there a new normal that waits for them? Or, I've been in TA for so long, do I really want to stay in TA? Should I be looking at something different? And is that going to be my new normal? So how you define normal is obviously incredibly subjective, and it comes down to individual preferences at every stage. But in terms of the broader societal normals, look, I think I still go and do my shopping in the supermarket. Changing slightly how I do that's normal. But I don't get to go out for breakfast anymore. I don't see myself going out for breakfast again this year, potentially. There's too many little variables that can impact on what normal actually is. So I don't.
It also comes down to another part of like deeming what your lifestyle was as normal. Like people go out for brunch and stuff like that. It's like, for me, I'm a bit of a creature of habit in terms of like at home. Like I spend a lot of time at home. Like this is fine for me already, but that's another part to it entirely about how I love to never leave the house and don't talk to anyone. It's how great works. And I work in video and make lots of nonsense content. It's great. What I would then like to do is to now translate that to the TA world and stuff like that. In terms of what we're seeing now with the nature of back to work and things like that, do you foresee potentially the new normal, or the new sort of current status is that this video interviewing style, utilizing the Zooms, the Skypes, the Google Hangouts, the Twitters, whatever it may be? Do you see that being now a company seeing that as a more functional and efficient tool, that when we even do go back to a normal state, that this will be something that we'll continue to have in our processes anyway?
Yeah, I think so. I used Zoom for a lot of videos in the past anyway, where needed, and it really didn't lessen the efficacy of the process in any way. So I definitely see there being a push to more video interviewing. I also think there's going to be more of an expectation on candidates to move to doing videos themselves. And I'm not talking about video screening, where we've seen lots of companies have video tools for once the candidate has applied, but I think we'll see more push into those video cover letters. I would expect an exponential increase in video content from employers.
Okay, so with that in mind as well, do you think that there will be a hesitation? So like, let's say, for example, I'll give you an scenario. Person applies all the way through to getting the job and starting on their first day. A hiring manager may not meet that person in person at all at this point in time, right?
Yeah.
Is that more efficient as a TA team member, or do you think you need to have a blend of that face-to-face, video combination, just even ignoring the pandemic in this sense? Could you do it all visually on video and hire that person, you think, or do you need that face-to-face time? You
don't need it. I've done it in the past, pre-COVID. It works perfectly well. Hired people from overseas, I've hired people from interstate that haven't been in a position to fly in for a meeting. And honestly, at the end of the day, the only people who have an issue with it tend to be people who don't like change. And it's served as a good argument against their concerns. So I've hired people very successfully without ever having physically met them, without the hiring manager ever having physically met them. And I don't see why that can't continue and increase.
Okay, cool. So with that all in mind, everything you kind of mentioned there as well, what would be the suggestions that you would make in order to improve the mindset on this, the language, the casing of, people are still working their butts off and doing the thing? What would you suggest would be a positive outcome from this? What would be something you can do?
Look, I think it's at a societal level, it's kind of hard. So I think if I just focus on what companies can do, it's working with their managers and leaders and so on to move away from that 9 to 5 mentality, reduce the number of meetings. People aren't going to be able to get into the office all the time. Once our restrictions have eased, it makes more sense to avoid those peak public transport commute times. So focus instead on performance and output and less on what bums are on the seat at 9 o'clock in the morning. So there's going to need to be a huge mindset change by leaders. Okay. And HR, TA needs to work with them to communicate. First of all, manage that change with the leadership, and then work on communicating that with their organization so that staff don't think it's just lip service during the pandemic, but actually make it a real change to the work culture. Sitting in the office at 9 o'clock does not mean you're very good at your job. Okay, what you produce is what you should be judged on, not on your punctuality. And this is coming from someone who is desperately punctual. I hate being late for anything. I have this irrational fear of being late, to the extent that I'm usually 10 to 15 minutes early. So yeah, take it from someone who.
Yeah, I totally get it. Just for everyone watching this, I purposely left Rebecca outside the meeting for an extra 2 minutes before it started, just to really screw with her at that point, just for fun, funsies, which is always good. So look,
I'm gonna talk to my therapist about you.
And so you should. You can say, this annoying Kiwi keeps telling me to stay out of my meetings for 10 minutes. It's great. So I know.
That could be my husband, by the way.
I mean, it could be. Yeah, I mean,
surrounded by Kiwis.
He and I are really two peas in a pod at this point, which is always fun. So same people, except he loves sourdough and I don't. That's it.
He does, yeah. And
that makes sense.
Cheers for the Crusaders and you cheer for the Hurricanes. So.
Well, we're about to change that up a little bit in our next segment, which is actually our little prize I want to give you. So we'll come back to it in a second. Okay, cool. So look, all 3 BSs I totally agree with. You may have noticed another change from me as well. It's a Waikato rugby here. So the reason why I agree with all the stuff that you've got to talk about, all the BSs, is because we're in a really weird world now, and I think that everyone is now in such one of those weird lulls of like, there's constant negativity on TV, there's constantly people telling you about all the stuff that's going wrong and how to go back to normal. But the one good thing we like to do on this show is to actually bring some positivity. And as for those who have been watching our show previously, you would know that I have a fantastic gift that I give to my guests every time. And of the last 7 episodes, 7 have given it back to me, but it's given me a chance to always offer it to the next person. So next, I have something that, whilst isn't necessarily, isn't as, what I'd like it to be. I've got my boy George here. He's someone else who, he's not as good as what I could originally give you, because the original one is of me, but it's kind of stuck in there. So I'm really excited to give you this, but I'm actually going to go into the office and get my gift, and I'll be really excited to give it to you.
Yeah, very, very sweet of you, Ben. However, if I wanted to have George or a photo of any other desperate Kiwi hanging on my walls, I might take a photo of the Blues rugby team instead. I think that might actually lend more class to my decor.
I have had a lot of insults thrown my way over the years. I have been called Ben. I have been called lots of other horrible things that I can't say on this. But I tell you what, there's one thing that I really can't get past is I just don't get why people don't want me. I mean, the photo. I just don't get the photo. George will stay with me and I will give him another gift. But I appreciate you being so candid, because I'm a Hurricanes to the Chiefs fan. So the Blues, good little rig there. So look, I will not be able to give you this gift.
It does look like you're wearing a Welsh rugby union top, by the way. And I know you've got a Welsh coach now. Well, actually, Kiwi coach who was in Wales. I mean, I can't take you seriously wearing that, dude.
You would think that. But the good thing about this is that he's the only person He's won a Grand Slam, and an Alliance Tour drawn with New Zealand. So he's done okay with that. So you'd think he won.
Oh, so you're giving him credit for drawing with New Zealand. So
I mean, the British and Irish Lions are taking credit for that technically being a win almost. So let's clarify that point. The drawing with New Zealand's just as good as a win, apparently. Just ask anybody in Ireland who had to wait, was it like 120 years to actually get a win against us?
111.
Yeah, and it was against a team that was like playing like Victor Vito at lock.
Excuse me, don't be giving me that bullshit now. Hang on, this is a new bullshit. The Kiwi reaction to getting thumped by Ireland in Chicago.
I tell you what, that might be it, but how was that reaction at the quarterfinals?
Yeah, no, it was not a good quarterfinal. How did you go against Italy?
Against Italy. You beat Italy.
You drew with Italy in the World Cup.
Oh, you're talking about the 2010 FIFA World Cup, where we drew with Italy and should have got through to the final because we were the only unbeaten team.
I was talking about the 2015 Rugby World Cup when you drew.
Did we? I thought we were talking about in 2010 when the All Whites drew with them in 2010, and we were the only undefeated team at the 2010 Football World Cup because we drew every single team and didn't make it out of the rounds. That's how New Zealand is good at sport. We're good at a few sports: rugby, rowing.
Yeah.
Complaining about Australia, it works. So who knows?
Oh yeah, that works. And by the way, I'm sorry that you're not winning the Bledisloe this year either.
Well, we've been winning it for 23 years, and it's probably going to stay in our NZRU, I assume, at this point. Who knows? Yeah. Well, look, as much as I'd like to sit here and get abused by you all the time, because I'm used to it by now, which is fine, I'd really like to thank you for joining me today in the first ISO edition of ThisIsBS.
Sure.
If there is anything that you would like to leave the viewers with today, what would you like to leave them with? Let's say for anyone from TA to candidates to anybody watching us on LinkedIn, what would you like to leave them with? What would you like them to know?
First of all, I will say that this too shall pass. The sun will come up tomorrow. So please, if you're feeling down and a little bit down and out about life and the circumstances in which we find ourselves today, please remember that the sun will come up tomorrow. If you are looking for work at the moment or you're not quite sure where to start, please go to Jobs4Australia.com. We have a great number of highly experienced talent acquisition and HR professionals who will help coach you through CV writing, interview preparation, looking at your LinkedIn profile or your personal brand. We can help you prep for video interviews as well. So please don't think that you're alone in this, and please reach out, friends, family, Jobs for Australia. We are all in it together, and we're coming through the other side. So stay strong.
Very excited. I've got one last final question for you. What's the etiquette for being on an interview? Can you wear shorts and then like a shirt and a tie when you're on like a film interview like this, or do you have to be? Because I'm wearing shorts, obviously.
Yeah,
I'm wearing shorts. So what's the etiquette if someone's interviewing for a job right now? Do they have to wear a shirt and tie and then wear underwear? What's the go?
I think follow the Jack Goodhue model of business at the front, party at the back.
Party at the back.
Mullet your way through a video.
Wear a suit and tie on top, and then wear what can only be described as either Quicksilver board shorts or a Budgie Smugglers, the blokes, if you want to really give that a crack. I don't know.
It's winter time though, so Budgie Smugglers might not show you off in the best light.
I'll be honest, I'm not doing any interviews, so I'll just wear Budgie Smugglers anyway. That's fine. So we'll see how it goes. Who knows? Good thing is I always do videos up here rather than down there. So look, thanks Bex for joining me today. It's been I really appreciate it. And for those who want to see more of ThisIsBS content, you can go to our website. That's fine. Go to our website. Go to our YouTube channel, which is all good. One last thing, as you might have said at the start, this video has been brought to you by Broad Bespoke, a brand new suit and tailoring company that has just popped up from the lovely Mitchell and Alex McCann. Thank you once again.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Time. We'll catch you all next time.
Absolutely. Thanks,
So
Ben.
I'm doing this hand gesture, something like that. So good.